It's recording.
All right, so we're here in our work session. As we move forward now, we're going to get a presentation from WCA on everything from the start of the task force, kind of how we got to this point, how the task force, what kind of a recap of each one of their meetings, so that everybody is aware of the steps and processes that went through to get to this point, to get to a recommendation. If you have questions, try to hold those till the end, because you might get those things answered if throughout this presentation they're going to go through kind of the entire process here. It's very, very encompassing of what happened, but it's quite a bit. So Lindsay's got a great presentation, and so as we move forward with this, we're going to see that presentation, and then as a board we need to look at that, what was presented to us from the task force, and decide, are we ready to move forward with this? And then if so, if we are, what does that steps look like? Some of that's going to be in the presentation of kind of an overview of what this process looks like. And then the next thing, obviously, if we're not ready for that, then what do we need? What more do we need to be able to be in a point where we're ready to move forward? As you will see, it's not just yep, we're going to do it, slap it on the ballot. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in between saying, yes, we're going to accept this, or no, we're not going to accept this, or we're going to take this plan and we're going to get to a ballot. There's quite a process that goes through that, and it's not a yep, we decided today and we're stuck in it, right? So if we say we accept this presentation that they gave us, we accept what the task force brought to us, and we get down the road a month or two and we've done some digging in and we decide, oh, wait a second, this isn't what we still have that ability. There's many checkpoints along the way that the board is going to be asked to make decisions going forward. So I guess overall, as we look at this presentation and what the task force brought to us, that's going to be part of what the board needs to decide is, are we comfortable with this? Is this what we want to move forward with? Okay, if so, now we have to do X, Y, and Z things before we are ready to present this to a ballot. So just as you're looking at this, thinking about questions you have about what is being presented, and then at the end, we're going to just want some feedback. I want to hear what each board member thinks of this and where you're at as far as, again, this is a work session. We're not going to take any action today. It's more of a similar to what we just did for the recording. Yep, I'm ready to move forward, or no, I have these questions and I need these answers before I can make that decision. That's kind of where we're at and what we're trying to get to. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. Good, Nathan? Then with that, did I miss anything?
No, you did a great job, thank you.
Okay.
I think maybe what we'll do first is, obviously, Lindsay, myself, just through the process so far, but we do have a new team member here.
Right, I was going to say, let's maybe do some introductions just to make sure, but.
Yeah, so Steve Rosetlo here has joined our K-12 team, been with us about 3 weeks so far. I'll maybe let you give a little background on your resume.
Well, sure. I've been a Minnesota Public School high school principal and a Minnesota Public School superintendent. I was superintendent over the Brainerd Public Schools for 6 years, 17 years in Brainerd. I've done a lot of work with WCA over the years, first as high school principal at Brainerd and as superintendent as well. We've had a great relationship with WCA. Part of my initial work is to listen and learn about communities like yours, and that's what I'm here to do tonight. I've seen some of the presentation, had some of the conversation already, been trying to get a little bit up to speed before I get here, and thank you for allowing me in.
Great. All right, we'll kick off the presentation. Maya, thank you for the great introduction to this process. What the presentation tonight is, I'm going to cover these 3 preliminary items. So community task force executive summary. So we're going to give you a high-level summary of the task force process. It was quite an in-depth process, so we have a lot of information to share. Then we'll talk about the guiding pinnacles, what those are and how they were established. That was a really creative and comment-filled process that we're excited to share with you. And then lastly, the overview of Plan B3, the one-site concept, which is part of that task force recommendation that you heard at your last school board meeting. We'll start in with the executive summary of the task force. This process started last October. Task force meeting number 1. All task force meetings have been held in this room. Some of you have joined us. So we started this meeting by gathering everyone, thanking them for joining, kind of explaining what the process of the task force initiative was for. We also did an overview of all of the past referendums within current history, just so everyone could have a good baseline understanding of how we got to where we are today. We also reviewed the past facility assessment of the secondary building that was done within recent years, and then also the facility assessment that our company did for the North and South Elementary buildings. As a part of that process, we also looked at educational adequacy. So facility assessment really looks at the brick and mortar of the building, kind of those building tangible components. Educational adequacy is understanding how education is delivered inside of the buildings and how that compares to the Minnesota State guidelines through the Department of Education. And then we also gave an update on our educational focus groups. So during this process, Brent and I had the opportunity to meet with staff from each of the 3 facilities and also students here at the secondary building and talk to them about how does your existing facility work for you, what doesn't work, and what could be improved in the future if we were to dream big. So that was a really fun process we got to update everyone on at that first task force meeting. So information overload was really the theme of that first meeting. Then we set out on our tours. So we did building tours. We started at the secondary school. All tours included tours of the interior of the facility. Kind of all the nooks and crannies did a full encompassing tour of the buildings. The exterior of the building as well as the site of the buildings. So starting here at the secondary school, then we went down south, took a look at the elementary school down there. We were able to enjoy lunch at the South Elementary School, which is an experience all in itself. And then we ended the tours up at the North Elementary. Task force meeting number 2 and 3 were back here at the secondary building. So this was an opportunity for people to really digest the information that they've learned and what they saw on those tours. I think seeing a facility assessment book is one thing, but to actually walk through these buildings, feel the spaces, see students and teachers interacting in those buildings was another experience we were really glad to share with that task force group. We took a survey of the group. So this little blue screen here on my presentation is a snippet of the Mentimeter survey program. So this is an online survey that we use throughout the task force. So it's anonymous. Everyone grabs their cell phone, they take a picture of the QR code, and then it links them into the online survey. Again, completely anonymous. We were able to collect live data from those that were in the room and then keep track of that data throughout the task force process. So we asked everyone what really stood out to you as far as the task force groups. We also asked people to start to help us prioritize the different deficiencies that we saw at the buildings. So we looked at north, south, and the secondary building on what are areas of importance that you really want this group to start to focus on. We then started talking about cost estimates for each of those buildings based on these priority items. So on the right-hand side of my screen is just a snippet of the secondary school. So we started to take a look at some of those items that were discussed and started to create some high-level cost estimates on if we were to repair these existing facilities, what would that start to look like from a cost perspective. Task force meeting number 4. This is where we started to really talk about the process and our focus of the group. Now that we had a really good foundational understanding of the facilities and what this group was looking to achieve, let's start thinking about the lens in which we're going to look at this so we're all moving in the same direction. We looked at first educational trends across greater outstate Minnesota. So a lot of what we heard from groups around the buildings is we don't really know what's out there. We've either spent our whole career or the majority of our time teaching here in West Central. We don't really know what a lot of school districts have to offer. So we came in and we presented some educational trends on what people are doing with career and technical education, play-based learning, different spaces that were created inside of schools that were not created 30 plus years ago. Then we looked at the district's strategic roadmap. So this was a document that was created in February of 2023 by the school district. It lists the core mission, the vision statement, core values, and then also strategic directions. And so we really focused on these strategic directions, and we started to think about facilities. This is why the task force was pulled together, to evaluate the facilities. And how can the facilities start to support the strategic directions of the school district? So question in Mentimeter, what improvements could be made to the district's facility to better support the mission statement? Think big, all ideas are welcome. Daycare and buildings, play-based learning spaces, outdoor turf instead of grass that kind of erodes away and creates muddy messes inside the building. More STEM programs in our elementary, more spaces, up-to-date learning spaces, state-of-the-art art learning spaces, increased technology, middle school, high school concept. Just some ideas that we've captured. There was a lot of comments and a lot of ideas that were gathered, again, through that Mentimeter unanimous survey. Then we took our strategic directions and we thought, you know what, let's roll up our sleeves and really get to work with this task force. So we set out to break out into 5 different groups of the task force. They were stationed out here in the commons area at different tables, and we gave each group a strategic direction to focus on. And then they started thinking about how could the facility start to support that strategic direction. Some examples I have here on the screen, staff. This was a big item, is how are we retaining staff? How are we attracting new staff? How are we promoting the staff that we already have? And so these are some of the brainstorming sessions that were created during that. First impressions, we asked a lot about, you know, what is the first impression of a visitor, a new parent, a potential new family into the district? What are some of their first impressions and how could the spaces be modified to enhance that first impression? Then we talked about what's the workforce of our communities and how can the West Central Area School District prepare our students for the workforce here locally without having to send them elsewhere for viable careers. How can we keep them here? So through this, we then discussed guiding pinnacles. I think, Paul, you brought the Bold School District example and how they had these guiding principles that really drove all the decision making for their facilities through these principles. And we thought, you know what, pinnacles make sense here. We've got castles, pinnacles are the very peak of the castle. And so guiding pinnacles, what do we want the lens or the focus of a facility project to look through? And so here are some just ideas that were generated through that guiding pinnacle conversation. A lot of these, again, were captured through group presentation, discussions, and then the Mentimeter survey as well. Safety and security, collaboration, cost, student equity, creative education, new updated facilities, career focused, community pride, efficiency, unity, student success, and one vision were some of those brainstorming ideas. And so we started to word collage those together. And by task force meeting number 6, we refined those ideas even longer, continued to discuss, and then ultimately developed the guiding pinnacles and voted upon those. So the guiding pinnacles that the task force developed is a future-focused education, operational sustainability, and one WCA community. At the task force meeting number 6, this was back in February of the year, we also started to look at demographics. So Paul, we brought in Hazel Reinhardt, and she did a really great job of understanding the demographics of the school district and the counties here that support the school district. Overall, the trend, not only in the school district, but what we're seeing statewide, is a gradual declining enrollment. Several things contributing to this: attrition, people moving out of the area, people aging out, lower birth rates, other alternate school opportunities for people. Not a lot in the area, but there's certainly a handful of other opportunities. Open enrollment out, but certainly we have open enrollment in as well. In addition to demographics, we also had Ellers here for a presentation that night, and we looked at the district financials. Hypothetical examples we chose here a $25 million referendum, and a $40 million referendum. These were just kind of picked kind of out of the ballpark. And so we can start to see what tax impacts would be, not only on residential and commercial property, but we also took a look at agricultural land as well. And so we could just start to see what are some of these ideas that we're gonna start to generate, what impact does that have to the tax base? The group thought that was really important, so that was a significant request, and so we're really glad that LRs were able to present this information. This is initial, but we've really refined that as that process went through. Then the task force was wondering, where are we going from here? What's the big picture vision? So we developed this roadmap for a referendum project, and I think this is really good even for tonight's conversation. So we created the facility assessments back in the summer of 2024. That's the great big book of all the deficiencies in all of the buildings, long-term deferred maintenance. Then we moved into the task force committee. This was fall and winter into 2025. We're at the recommendation to the school board phase, so we're kind of at the end of that phase. Now we have the rest of this roadmap in front of us. So in an ideal progression of steps, next we look at the pre-referendum planning phase. So even if a recommendation to the school board is accepted, and we choose to go forward with referendum planning, there's still a lot of legwork and a lot of input that needs to happen. So the task force members were community volunteers, they included educators, some administration was also in the room, but we really didn't get the chance to sit down with any of these ideas and plans and really vet them through these schools, through the staff, through support, through administration, through student involvement. So that's a really critical part in any referendum process, is to understand the staff's reaction to these changes. Programming of gym spaces, how are we using breakout spaces? Do we have enough special ed and right size special ed spaces? Those are educated class questions that the task force was not prepared to make, but that's why we come into this next step, this pre-referendum phase. This is where we review, verify, re-review, and verify back and back again until we have it right. So this process could take quite a bit of time. So the refining of business building plans, this is a process between, we can facilitate this, the district. We've also, in very small letters up there, have a CM. Construction managers often get brought in at this phase of the process as well. So we have provided some high-level cost estimating based on our past project experience, things within a year or two that have been bid. But construction managers, they have their finger on the pulse of the bidding world. So they can much better estimate a lot of these ideas for us. So at that point, when we're refining, we're kind of coming from up here and we're getting narrower and narrower and narrower into what the project will ultimately be. The construction manager will help us with that. We can also talk about the feasibility of construction schedule and how that will impact your school year and your school summers. We can talk about construction materials. We know air handling units and electrical panels are incredibly long lead time items right now. So are there multiple bid packages that should be considered? All of those things are really good to have in those early on conversations in planning and development. We also look at financial and operating costs at this phase. And then ultimately we're preparing a review and comment, which is a requirement with the state of Minnesota, their educational department. So you're familiar with packets that have been submitted in the past. They go to the state at a certain time frame, and then there's this review and comment period where the state comes back and says, you're on the right track, or we need to think about this a little bit differently. Ultimately, they need to get their approval before a referendum vote can happen. So you can see that as the next step there, is the possible referendum vote in the time frame. Once a vote is held and is successful, then we start with our design and bidding phases. So this is a lengthy process too. We do a lot of the heavy lifting in this phase. We've collected a lot of input. Now we have to get it on paper so contractors can bid and build the project. Once it's bid successfully, we roll into construction, and then you have your occupancy. So this whole roadmap takes a couple of years, and we can look at a different schedule I brought from a different school district that's going through that today. But we're still kind of in these initial phases, and there's a lot more development and input we need before we have a well-designed plan that we feel very confident with in going out to the public to ask for support on. So from here, we started the development of more refined plans and concepts. Tonight we're going to review option 3B, which is the task force is recommended plan. This is the one site plan. So we're here at the secondary building. The areas in gray on our map are to stay relatively unchanged. The areas in blue or that dark gray color, those are areas of remodel or improvement. And the areas identified in red would be building additions. So adding square footage to this building, we're increasing the square footage by just over 47,000 square feet. However, district-wide, we've reduced total square footage by almost 64,000 square feet. So increase here for more students, but overall decreasing at the schools, north and south. A lot of work went into Powell meeting with your administrative team at all three of the buildings to understand the programming of a building like this and incorporating those different age ranges into one building. And so we projected out on when this building might be able to be occupied through that whole design process, that roadmap we just showed to you. At that time, what is our enrollment going to be? And we think we're right on the cusp of a 2 to 3 sections. So we're kind of calling this like a 2.5 section building. So we've got 2 sections with some flex space built in. On the map here, you can see the side of the building that's actually here to the right of us tonight is allocated as the middle school wing. So these are the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classrooms with their support spaces and flex spaces built in there. On the other side of the high school, so kind of behind us here, is more of the high school wing, and then extending up into that CTE wing. And then you can see the elementary wing addition with a dedicated entrance. So there would be 2 clear paths of entrance there. Let's flip over to that site plan so you can see. So blue arrows indicating entrance into the secondary building and an entrance into that elementary school. Knowing that we're going to have an increased occupant load here at the secondary site, the increase in parking is definitely needed. So to the west of the addition, we've increased parking. This would be ideal for staff and facility parking, keeping the parking out front to the east here, just for visitors, parents, those types of things, students, of course. Some dedicated bus loops, knowing that the elementary students will be entering the school from a different point than the high school students, creating this bus loop so they have a safe, secure entrance. They're not having to cross paths with moms and dads doing drop-off in the morning for pickup. Also increasing the parking to the south here allows parking closer, certainly to the athletic fields, but then the fitness addition over in the corner here by the gym. And then also the incorporation of field restrooms. So these restrooms would be attached to the building. They're incredibly expensive, we found through our process, to build out from the building. So keeping those attached to the building are much more cost effective. And then it is a little bit of a walk, but definitely a cost saving measure there from the fields. Increased aesthetics to the building, kind of getting away from the green and bringing more of that night pride to the building, the west central area pride to the building. And then as you can see, the elementary addition is overlaid on one of the softball fields along with the parking on the other. So we did incorporate costs for purchasing of new land and the recreation of softball fields somewhere. We don't know where that is, but we just took an average land acquisition cost and put that into the budgets. Outdoor play space. And then we've also the task force had a lot of really creative ideas here at the end of the process. So we wanted to capture them. They weren't all fully vetted at the time, but additional gym space was definitely a conversation. And then the potential for CTE addition from one of those past referendum efforts. We did want to identify that on here. Those things I think just need more vetting. When I talked about this roadmap, sitting down with those user groups, again, the task force is volunteers. They're not people that necessarily program the building. So we need to really understand, what are these gym spaces used for? What is the CT addition needed for? And then we can start to program those spaces and define that a little bit better. I use the example of, is it a multi-purpose gym with a rubber sports floor and mobile nets so it can be used for a multitude of different things? Or is it a dual station competition gym with a wood sleeper system and retractable equipment into the ceiling? That's a very different space. So we need to understand that from the athletic director and the sports programming team there. We also did some visuals just to help conceptualize what this could potentially look like. So you can see here on the lower left, a concept for just enhancing that high school entrance and creating some visual enjoyment and some aesthetics. And then also the elementary wing, creating a dedicated safe entrance for people to bring their smaller children into that area of the building. Great ideas. This is what it's going to cost from a cost breakdown. So we took a look at the cost project-wise, project encompassing. So we also wanted to incorporate a cost for the North and South Elementary School for demolition and restoration to that site. Those buildings do not necessarily have to come down, but we want to plan for worst case scenario when we're talking budgets. It's really important to not leave behind an unused asset in a community. There might be an opportunity to use the buildings, and the task force definitely had some really creative, productive ideas for both of the buildings. However, we want to have a place marker in those budgets to do the demolition and restoration of that site, so we're not leaving an unoccupied building behind in any building. That's just good standard practice. So those line items can certainly be flexible based on what's decided with those buildings. Secondary school, you can see how our estimates have broken down. We have also added alternates here to the cost estimate, just to give you an understanding of what some of those alternates could look like from a cost perspective, just to be very fully transparent. So we can add that into the cost. So the one site project with all the alternates, because again, those kind of came in at the last maybe 11th hour. So we wanted to just stay with what had been developed to this point. Approximate cost per square foot for the project, $169 a square foot. Current student enrollment, we wanted to identify what we're at right now today, 785. Building size, 177,000. So based on Department of Education's guidelines for a one-site concept, we should be between 200 and 320 square feet per student. Right now we're about 225 square feet per student. So we're right comfortably in that range. Okay, so what does this do to our tax impact? We circled back to Ellers and we said, we want to better understand what this tax impact would do to our users. So just there's a kind of a footnote down here due to the fiscal year and the timing of a potential election. We're looking at worst case scenario where the first interest payment would be due in a fiscal year. So it kind of increases those levy costs. So we're actually looking at the second column for that just under 30 million. Ultimately it would be a $31.4 million referendum. And then we also wanted to take a look at those alternates that you saw on the screen. So just to be very clear and transparent, that's what that project would look like with those alternates built in there with the projected increases due. We also took a look at more expensive projects and then a less expensive project, just to give an idea on the range. Additionally, or lastly, we heard a lot of questions about operational costs. Now we did have utility data, so this is one of those operational costs we were able to study. So you can see the current district totals throughout the years and the average cost. There's a huge flexibility based on the weather, actually. Quite drastic when we look at those numbers. So pray for good warm winters ahead. North Elementary, South Elementary operational costs in option 3B would be down to 0. Secondary school would increase slightly with the increased occupant load here on the building, but you can see district-wide, ultimately, a really good utility cost savings. One of the task force members said, oh, that's only $100,000. And we said, yeah, but over the course of 10 years, that's $1 million. So it really is impacting from a utility perspective. Not to mention lawn care, snow removal, garbage, delivery service. You know, there's all these other operational costs we could start to consider as well. So the culmination of the task force group, the last meeting, we posed 2 questions. Question 1 through Mentimeter, again, this is the unanimous voting polling software. As a member of the task force group, do you approve option 1C, which is to modernize and update all facilities as presented? 6 voted yes, 14 voted no. I should mention, I think I forgot to mention, we did ask the group what they felt a good consensus number would be within the task force. Do we want 100% unanimous consensus? Do we want 51% consensus? How did we feel that consensus number would be? We voted and the group felt like a 74% consensus would be a thumbs up for them, that they felt like that would be a good group, recommendation moving forward. So saying that, option 3B question, as a member of task force group, do you approve of option 3B, one campus as presented? 16 voted yes, 4 voted no. I believe this is 81% consensus. So we exceeded what we had established for ourselves as consensus. Then we went on to the recommendation to the school board. This was read for you at the last school board meeting. After extensive review and discussion, the West Central Area Schools Task Force recommends the school board to move forward with option 3B, one site as presented at the task force meeting number 8. This direction reflects a commitment to addressing current facility needs while honoring the values and priorities expressed throughout the task force process. As implementation planning moves forward, the task force recommends the school board continue to engage the community to ensure transparency, gather feedback on specific design and programming elements, and foster support for the project. The task force further recommends that the board remain guided by the following core pinnacles throughout the process: future-focused education, operational sustainability, and one WA community. So that's the summary of the task force groups. We could probably talk for 18 hours on all of the information and all of the survey data that was collected. But I think we tried to do a good job of summarizing that process. It was a huge commitment to everyone that participated, and just great engagement overall. It was really a pleasure to work with that group. So back to our roadmap for referendum projects. We're here kind of at the culmination of the task force committee. The task force has made that recommendation to the school board. And so, now I think would be a great opportunity to kind of discuss these task force findings. If we want to go back and page through any of this information, we certainly could do. But I think it'd just be great to hear from you all on your thoughts after learning a little bit more about that task force process, what we uncovered from data perspective, demographics, kind of everything we've presented tonight.
Don't everybody speak at once. Claire, what are you thinking?
Okay. Well, I think you gave a really factual, nice summary of things that helps to kind of reframe that after not thinking about this over the summer, right?
I asked you, you attended a lot of the meetings. Is there anything you would add to that? Is there any?
No, I really think we can't lose sight of the 3 pinnacles. I think, it's easy to drift. And so my hope is that forms the foundation for our decision making as a group.
We looked at Bold's referendum efforts. I think they were successful last year in their referendum vote. And their vote yes information that they displayed to their community, I believe, was 2 8.5 by 11 sheets, maybe 3, front and back on one maybe. But they had their guiding principles color-coded in 3 different colors, and anything that was addressed on the floor plan was color-coded in one of those categories. So everything that they did to their buildings was based on those 3 core principles. I thought it was so clear, concise, and transparent. They had a really nice direct narrative, but it boiled down to that, these 3 pieces of paper, or 2 pieces of paper, one front and back, that they delivered to their community to help support the referendum.
What did they pass?
I don't recall. Was it 14 million?
was more than that.
Another project, what all did they do?
I think, did they work on 2 of their facilities? I think making improvements, enhancements, and things like that. I'd have to double check that out.
Safety and security was their top priority, so safe and secure entrances, updating their educational adequacy, they were falling behind. So they really needed to boost their educational spaces, and I forget their third, principle.
Keeping their buildings?
I have it, I can pull it up, yeah, it's very well done,
It's 39, if I'm reading this correctly, 39, almost 49.
could be, yeah.
Did,
Yeah, they kept 3 buildings then.
did they
went
close
to
the
2.
building
I
though?
think they went to 2.
Mm-hmm.
Did they close one?
I don't remember the specifics.
I can't remember.
Let's see.
They were a presenter, I think at MSBA last year.
Yep.
If I remember correctly, I think one just became like an activity center. It
Yes,
wasn't any educational, it was
Correct.
just gyms and.
yeah. I remember that now. Other thoughts, comments?
Nathan? Josh?
In addition to the, like, the utility savings, was there ever a number associated with, like, you know, snow and lawn care, that type of, like, was that part of the utility savings, or was it just power, water,
Yeah,
you
it
know?
was just power, water, gas,
Okay.
the main one. So we were able to get, 5 or 6 years worth of.
Yeah, 5 years of utility bills. Yep.
Yeah, and that's what we based it on,
So the savings would be more if you're not, you know, actually running those 2 buildings.
Correct.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, all those other periphery services. that
It depends on the square footage. If you do square footage for square footage, which we're reducing it by 60-some thousand currently in this plan, right? Then that makes sense. If you're, you know, it's almost a 2-to-1 ratio.
Right.
When you're adding air conditioning to any building, it's almost a 2-to-1 ratio, so it's, you heat 2 square feet for same price that you can heat and cool 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we took that into consideration with option 3B. Currently, your elementary schools are not air conditioned. So bringing the elementary school here, we're adding that square footage and we're increasing the utility load because we would provide cooling to that facility. So,
Yeah, that was part of our thought process too on.
I'd be awful surprised if you say that. I haven't seen it yet. It's kind of what I do. I've never seen it.
But then if we were to add
But-
air conditioning to our elementary
Right.
schools, we'd
Yeah.
get $430.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's,
I was gonna say-
the cost is going up no matter what.
If you were gonna stay the same footprint, you wouldn't, but if you're gonna.
Even trying to make it smaller is because there'll be double the amount of lights in every room that there currently is. Even though they're LED, you're still gonna add, you know, you're just based on codes and things, it happens that way pretty much every.
Usually
thing
the
I've
biggest
seen,
impact
right?
would be
I mean,
having air
It
conditioning.
made the courthouse significantly more efficient, but the utility bills go way up because they have more lights in the rooms and
yeah.
just because they have to.
Mm-hmm.
Not, just, I mean, it's.
Required, code required.
It is what it is.
Mhm.
It's just, that's what we see. My biggest concern is the, if this is the plan that goes on the deal, is, do we have adequate space? Because we've been told by experts over and over and over again that we need a certain amount of space, and I get that enrollment's going down, but it's not going down that fast. It's at the same numbers as we were told when we started this process in 2013 with Pat Westby. If you go back and look at those slide sheets, it's almost identical. What was supposed to happen and didn't. And all of a sudden, the next 3 years later, we're playing 2A basketball, you know? And so to try and for sure think you can estimate kids that aren't born yet is out of our control, right?
Yeah, it's challenging.
So there's nothing you can do about it.
Mhm.
I totally understand where you're at, but like, for gym space, we've talked about this, that we're at a deficit currently. So currently, we have basically, I would, from a basketball coaching perspective, I'd say we have 6 full courts currently in our district. With this plan, we're losing at least 1 full court. And we're at a deficit prior to. So how do we address that first off?
Are you including Kensington as a full court?
Yeah,
Does it get used very often?
I used it almost
It's
exclusively.
currently
You
used
use it, they're all full, including Hoffman. That's why we have boosters has to pay Hoffman $3,000 a year, because it's used almost daily. All of them are.
No, Darren,
And we know we're at a deficit, so it's all about that. My question is just, like, and then we get into the classrooms, and currently, we have, are we gonna have some first grade, currently right now, if we were gonna move to this new building, we must have, we have at least 3 sections in most, when you're counting
Between the
both
two
ends,
buildings,
right?
yep.
And would it be fair to say that probably in some of them grades, it's pretty full, like it would be 3 sections if all those kids were in one building? Or
Currently where we're at, we'd be full, but I mean,
would
all
it
as
be
we look.
close?
Yep, as we look.
Because
Our numbers are still
I don't
at,
know that there's enough space in this plan currently for even the educational side, unless we lose a substantial amount of students.
Yeah.
And room sizes, you know, is as well, you know, we were in almost every other plan prior to this, we were at 950 square feet for a normal classroom, and now we're down to, and that alone with the numbers before, there would have been less square footage per student in that classroom, because we were gonna go up a few students before, right? We were gonna go from 4 sections down to 3, so we were gonna add some kids to a classroom, which is fine, we'd still been within the number probably, you know, it's just based on what we wanna do. But even at that 950 per child, we would have lost square footage in that room. Now, the rooms would have been built probably so that they're more adequate for education, and it probably, maybe it wouldn't have mattered, right? I don't know. But now we're down to at least, what, 925 each classroom. So I'm a little concerned that maybe, you know, can we bump up the size of these classrooms, like kindergarten, you know? I got a lot of, you know, Dale Hogan, I didn't see eye to eye on everything, but I had a lot of respect for him, and he had made good arguments for these sizes of these rooms, you know, that he drew up, plus the prior people before. And our kindergarten rooms at that time were 1,200, now they're down to 1,100. That's stuff that worries me in this plan, and all that I think can be tweaked. And the problem with tweaking it is there's cost, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, every foot you add.
But I'm not willing to, I don't know if I'll vote for this plan no matter what, but if it passes, I want it to be right. And that's what I've said, well, every year I've been on the board. You know, even if the plan that I don't particularly like from a location standpoint and amount of building standpoint, those kind of things. If it does pass, I want it to be adequate. And I can see right from what we have right here, there's no way, at least on the athletic side, that it's adequate, because I know we've been in a deficit for too long. And we're still gonna be there, unless you plan on keeping some other buildings open for them kids to use.
Darren, I think you're asking important questions, and we've kind of had some informal conversations, but now it maybe really is paramount that we need Jake to, you know, really put a pencil to space that's in this plan, and our principals. Because there are lots of, you know, and that's our wheelhouse, but there's lots of scheduling things that can happen on space, particularly when you have a staff all in one location. So I would really like to see some detailed work from them on, you know, how would they operationalize this? And then for us to hear that, and for you to hear, you know, what does that look like in a kindergarten room? What does that look like with gym space? And, you know, I don't have any expertise on, you know, sports, and I understand that, but Jake certainly could chalk to that, and I think it'd be really important for us to hear that information as part of this process.
Yeah, that's really that next level.
Well, I think so too, but we're going beyond just the 8 AM to 3 PM stuff, right?
Right.
We're going to
Yeah.
the 8 o'clock at night, and the data's there. The data's there that the gyms are full, the coaches can't get any time, and they used to give me hell all the time because they said, you got all the space, you got all the time, because I did it in September, then they stopped letting me do it in September. And so, I mean, I know that we're at a deficit, I mean, the data's already there for that. And then, unless we're not gonna have a half a team, I mean, so even though we lose students, we're still gonna have a third grade boys basketball team, third grade girls, fourth grade boys, fourth grade girls, volleyball, all these different things, and like I said, so the data's already there, so I mean, that's kind of what we're here for, right? Just not to accept or
Well,
deny this plan, but to maybe.
I think
make
the
some tweaks.
initial
I think
concept of the plan is what we need to say. Is the board ready to move forward with the plan? Obviously, there's things that need to be tweaked. I mean, the task force, I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the last meeting, they wanted to just put the second gym space in, and we just said, let's just wait, and that'll be part of the refining process, right? So, I mean, I think the task force, definitely, there was plenty of sports dads and moms on the task force that knew that gym space was hard to get to and had those conversations about that. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of that, the educational space, there's some more community educational spaces built into the newer plan.
Correct.
So it's not all just stuck in the classroom like we are currently. There's no hallway in these, in the old buildings. So there's spaces that are built for breakout things that aren't in a normal classroom that we have currently.
Yeah.
And so some of that takes away, some of those classroom sizes don't have to be as large because there's other spaces already dedicated for some of the things that they're trying to do in addition to what they do in their classroom currently. But as we move forward now, as a board, we have to decide if this concept is what we're looking for. And then obviously, yes, there's plenty of refinement that has to go into it. And maybe we come to it and that has to be a, 2.5 or a third gym space, or maybe it's gotta be longer or wider, or whatever that looks like. Those are all pieces that has to go along in this process. But first and foremost, we have to say, yep, this is where we wanna start from so that we can move forward and a plan.
How do you know that if you're gonna change dollar amount as you tweak it? Wouldn't you wanna get to where you wanna be and then know what the dollar amount is before you make that decision?
Yeah,
Or
that's
one
why
thing instead
we,
of the opposite way around?
yeah, that's why we provided that.
Right, but
here.
what I'm saying is if some of my ideas, of what I think we need are changing in this plan, that dollar amount changes, right? If we go to 950 square feet per room and 1,200 for our kindergarten rooms, and we add another gym so that at least we're adequate, we're even with what we had, that all changes that number, does it not?
Absolutely, yeah.
And maybe a little, I don't think the space outside, it changes by the looks of your overlay. I think if we made the building, whatever, it's 30 feet longer, and 40 feet wider and added that gym, you still fit in the footprint that you have, right?
Yeah.
It looks like we still gotta redo the softball fields, we still gotta buy land for that and all that business, no matter what, if this project happens.
Yeah, if you added, let's say 25 square feet to every classroom,
That's what-
it's not a huge increase, you're adding 500 square feet.
I mean, you're adding the size of this tabletop to each classroom.
So
Yeah,
it
that's what
it
you're-
does
I mean,
change
that's-
the
that's
number.
what we're talking about,
You are
though.
correct,
If it
but you're
makes-
right in the footprint, it doesn't
And,
impact.
there may be I don't know. If
But
I
it's
believe
something-
what other experts have told us, even if we meet in the middle, we still gotta add at least 2 flex rooms to this, in my opinion. And that was without cutting out some of the science and whatever rooms here that they're taking over. You're taking over some rooms for the elementary from this room, right? Or from this building.
Yep.
That we were told was full. But, so,
We had 100 kids more when that happened though. That's part of the piece that has to come into play. We had 800 kids the last time we tried to do this. Now we have 700.
we didn't have 100 more in this.
we had 100 more kids, and that's
Oh,
where
they're
that's where they're
all
talking
there,
about putting them,
right?
right?
But you're right, but we wanna expand into these other avenues too. All I wanted is, if this is what happens, I'm not gonna argue with you guys all night, I'll vote how I wanna vote, but
Absolutely.
in my heart, if this thing was to go on the ballot and pass, it better be adequate for what we need.
We also gotta
Because
keep,
I don't wanna come 2 years down the road and say, oh, we're out of space, we need more gym space. You tore down 3 gyms and now our kids, now we can't start practices till they're in 5th grade.
So Darren, I brought up an idea that perhaps the people that have the most expertise in those areas really put a pencil to this and say, this is bumpy in this area, or we think this will work, and so that we have that information, that I don't think anybody disagrees with you that we wanna make sure we hit the mark on whatever we do. So I think there's consensus with that we need more information to make sure, but I think what I'm hearing you say is this concept what we want to support as a board to move forward? And that concept is a one-site plan. And that's the nut tonight to talk about, and we start that conversation.
Claire, that's a really good point. We heard a lot about the cost, and the task force felt really conflicted on, we'd love to develop a concept, we also are realistic people, and so we need to know what this costs. And so, you know, we're focused really heavily on the cost conversation, and even just bidding. If we bid it in the fall versus the spring, that could significantly impact the cost of things. I mean, look at what COVID did to us for pricing. I mean, it threw every pricing book we have in the history of the world out the window. So everything will impact this, absolutely. And we don't have that magic 8-ball, unfortunately, but we do have historical data that we're building this off of. And so, you know, to say that the cost is what we're looking at, it's not, it's the concept. You said that so well. One thing we have not touched base on tonight is the community survey. And that's another thing that could significantly impact this. So we can create this ideal world that we are all agreeing on, but until it goes out to the public for vote and they say yes or no, that's the ultimate decision. And so if we're designing something that's not going to be approved by the city or, you know, by your district, that's a fail in my mind. And so, you know, something we've mulled around as a group is, do we need to go ask the community what they would support from a tax impact? And so, you know, these cost estimates help us understand what those ranges could be. But what if they came back and said, yes, this looks good, or why aren't you considering these additional things? Or absolutely not, you need to pare it back to this level. So that plan could change just based purely on the feedback we get from the community survey.
Nathan had something.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to take a minute, at least. We asked part of the public, we asked part of the public to come in here and give us an idea of what to do. They've given us an idea, and I think we need to move forward with it. Now, the dollar amount is one thing, square footage is one thing, that's not to be decided tonight. I think there are ideas to streamline this and cut some corners. Every corner of that new addition is money. But the adequacy of the square foot, I'd like to hear as well, you know. I haven't had any experts tell me anything about the square foot of the building not being enough. And I'm thinking about the education of our kids going into the future, getting them ready for their job. Yes, sports is a big thing. Is it, you know, is learning to weld, learning how to construct a building, how are we gonna weigh this out? That's what we need to be thinking about when we build this new building. The cost savings, the $169 a square foot is a little misleading to me, because when I calculate, it's actually $635 a square foot for the additional square footage. And to me, that's really high. And that's where I think that some of this stuff can be streamlined, cut out the corners. Like I said, every corner is costing us a lot of money. what are the next steps? That's what we're here to discuss. In my book, we've been given the opinion of our next steps, or the idea of our next steps, and we need to take and run with it. As a board, we asked that a year ago, and we have our answer. And that's my opinion of it. I'd like to, visit more about, from you folks, what is our next steps? Is it we need to send out a survey, then that's what we need to do, we need to get those questions in order. The tax impact is, it doesn't look like that much money when you look at it up there on the TV, but that's gonna be a bigger hurdle than Jim's face right now, because our farm economy is in the tank. That's gonna be, and our economy affects the elderly in the community, the middle-aged. We're not gonna have a bunch of industry move in here. We don't have the natural gas. So our population isn't gonna grow unless something, John Deere builds a manufacturing facility here, or, it isn't gonna happen. So how do we, that's our biggest hurdle. That's what it's been all the time, is the tax impact. I have a little concern about completely deleting our ball fields and buying land as well, but we have to, I'll go back to that, we've been given the proper approach is to have one site by more people than are sitting here tonight, so that's my feeling.
Thank you.
Kayla, I think you had something earlier to say.
Kayla?
I forgot. No. I've always liked the one concept, or the one site concept. I mean, ever since this was started, well before my time. And I honestly, like Nathan said, going forth with what the task force, I mean, this is what we selected them to do. And it's not like we turned anybody away. We got multiple different opinions. And based on the voting numbers, I mean, you convince some of those no voters, I mean, that are very strong in their communities. Kensington and Elbow, I've always thought, hurt us more financially than anything else. Being able to consolidate it into one facility would help with staffing. We wouldn't have to hire an extra choir teacher. And I mean, there's so many things that we can share, and all the kids can have the same experience. Because right now we have elementary kids that are experiencing two very different things. So I remember I can't remember if my oldest was in kindergarten when they got the blue ribbon in Kensington, like some of the LBA community was upset. It's just like, well, it's just a different elementary school. So, I don't know, I'm all for it. And I mean, the space, the gym space, that can all be decided further down the road. But this is the concept I feel we need to move forward with.
Ryan?
Well, I would agree with that. Nobody was turned away from the task force. Anybody that was a resident that wanted to be on it was more than welcome to be here. There were a lot of people that didn't show up after the first couple of meetings, but that wasn't anything to do with how the task force was run.
I'll just pause you just because we did deny one person. They did not live in the district. And so that, just to be clear, there was one member that was denied, but they did not live in the district, so they did not, we decided it had to be a district resident. So just to be clear, that's, you can go ahead.
And I think there's a lot of operational savings in the one site plan. Choir teacher, as you said, dean of students. You wouldn't need the elementary dean of students.
Or even the running back and forth between schools. I mean, because you look at Kevin, I mean, having to go to 3 separate schools, or there's just definitely a lot more pros.
Then you talk to Mr. Sawatsky, who tries to run some ag education in the elementaries. And pretty much by the time his students get to the elementaries, they're able to take care of their plants, and then they have to turn around and go back. time to interact with the kids. I think there's a lot more flexibility having everything in one site as far as dealing with declining or possibly positive enrollment. If you end up with a section and a half in one school and a section and 3/4 in another school, it's pretty tough to deal with that. Here you would be able to make that adjustment much more easily. So we also have to keep in mind that large group of people that dedicated 8 months to coming up with this plan. If if they had in their mind right away what they wanted and if they didn't consider everything else, if they were just gonna go for the one site right off the bat, why did it take 8 months? So I think they did their due diligence looking at all possibilities.
I would echo, and maybe you guys could, you were at, I wasn't at every meeting, but I think there was a lot of aha moments for many of our task force members. Like, they were like, oh, like I didn't realize that, or I never knew that, or, there was a lot of those moments that happened in that process. And it was, I think one of the task force members said, as you all walked in, I could tell which one of you was a vote, one site, and which one of you was a 3 site. I knew that right away, and I think that dynamic changed while they were there. But that was a comment that was made in the one meeting that I sat in on, was that, I thought I knew I could tell where every one of you would vote when we started, and that's not how it ended. So I think that's very, and please, input if you thought otherwise. Obviously, you maybe didn't have the historical knowledge, but I think there was many members that had aha moments as they were going through these process. So
I think having that pot, that was a big thing that they kind of talked about. I think being able to share those kids, like you said, Ryan, having those kids come down. I think the idea of that we have non-licensed or unlicensed teachers in certain areas that we could fill if we were just into one site. So I know that was one of the other comments was, you're telling me if we were into one site or had one elementary, even if it was 2 sites, that we wouldn't have this? Yep, that's the pieces that we would have. And I know somebody actually this morning just said, the other piece too to please consider, they said, is you've got a lot of square footage that we're taking away, but if you think about the north building, there's a lot of hallways in that building that you have to walk around to get there. We've got an unused concession stand that we don't use for educational space. So started identifying to say, please keep in mind educational space, not just space, that hallway space doesn't do anything more than add steps to your pedometers as you're going through there. So to keep that in mind, that we don't have that here now in this floor plan and things like that. But I think, yeah, and then just, I think about the insurance, and we've spent a lot of money on insurance because we have 3 sites, and I know Larry's still looking to see, he believes that it's all combined, but if we have one incident in Elbow Lake and we have one at secondary school, is that a $50,000 deductible on both, or is it just, one? But I think it's also that piece there. We know our roofs are aging, and so it would also help on that expense when we saw that $50,000 increase a year ago in our insurance with that deductible going up as well. So those are some of the expenses that we didn't include there, but I think, yeah, for me, it's that operational sustainability that we can put more money into those classrooms, teachers, students, and things like that.
I think my biggest takeaway, our presentation and the task force was driven on data and facts and Department of Education guidelines. But my biggest takeaway is just getting to know this district and understanding who's here. And, we first heard it really early on. Like, I toured my kids through the buildings, and I would have never enrolled my, preschooler in one of these buildings until I met the staff, and they just drew me in automatically. And a lot of people talked about the dynamic of the staff and how impactful they are as a unit. But then we learned a little bit more about that and how the staff is so separated, and they only get a chance to see each other a few times a year and to collaborate. And they talked about how important it would be for them to be able to be together, share resources, collaborate. Being so separated is challenging for them, and being together. That was one thing I heard. That's not really data, it's not really a tangible thing, but that really resonated with me, is how impactful the teams are if they're separated. How amazing could they be together if they came to one building?
Any other comments or?
Well, I think the survey is really important. I'm just a little confused on the sequence of, like, are we first need to make a consensus that we're okay with this or not, or then you do, I'm just not sure about.
So I think initially, what would happen, and again, I think you've got that other timeline that we could probably pull up too, that, so essentially what happens now is we need to just say, yep, this is our, this one side option is our plan going forward, and and so then the board as a whole, we would vote at the next meeting to say, we're gonna accept this option, we're gonna move forward with a one-site plan. And then we start following it, we start looking at our timeline. So the next thing would be timeline. So I think, this would be for, is this next year's numbers?
Yeah.
Or is this, so the option, there's only a few times a year where the board can actually hold a vote. I'll just jump right to I don't think we're ready before November. That's my opinion, and that's just from doing this a few times. As you start to look at all the things in that timeline, that snake that we looked at, there's a lot of things to do yet before June, I think it's June, right? So let's just pick November, just as so by June, we have to have plans ready, everything finalized to be sent in for review and comment. And so that brings us down to, we're talking 10 months away. That's not very much time in the grand scheme of things to get all these pieces done. And you've got anyway, so there's a lot of things to do between here and there. So now if you back up, I think there's an August option, there's an April and May option, but those just keep pushing that review and comment back, right? So for instance, if you wanted to go out in February, your review and comments gotta be done here in a month or so, right? So I mean, there's just things that we can't hit regardless of what we wanna do. So the other side of that is a special elections cost the district. So we're gonna pay for that separately, no different than we're gonna pay for this special election in November. It's gonna cost us $10,000 to $15,000 to hold a special election. Is it worth that to move our timeline up a month or two? Personally, I don't think so. And I don't think the public thinks so either. So, again, this is my opinion. I think if we say, yep, this is the plan we wanna move forward with, next we pick when are we gonna be ready in November. The one nice thing about November is we've got the next 10 months to figure out if we're ready or not. If we're not ready for November, that can be pushed, but I think we're at the earliest, I think November's gotta be our target. That's, again, my opinion. I'm not trying to tell you what to say, but, so that'll be our next step, is to decide, okay, we're gonna shoot for, we're gonna take a one-side option, we're gonna shoot for a November election. And then you start to look at, what does that look like on a calendar as far as what are our milestones and when are things due, and we build back from that. So if we do a November election, we got a June review and comment, we've got final draft, they've got all this kind of in a PowerPoint here, some timelines that we can work backward from, and you can just kind of see the ultimate grand scheme of things of what our window is, and it's very compact.
It is, yeah. And Maya, I think you said that really well. So, 5 times a year that a school district is eligible to vote in a special election. We work ourselves back from this review and comment deadline. That's really when our job needs to be done. Obviously, the vote is several months out from that, but that's really when the state is reviewing us and approving us. So that's when things are due. So we like to keep those dates at the front of our mind. So that's about 10 months. From go on the referendum effort till the time we vote. This is a different school district that I'm working with. This is a completely different schedule, but it's 10 months. So you can see. The school board approved us in July to move forward with the referendum support. And then we're voting in April. So it's a 10-month duration for that whole effort. We've got some stars here at some key milestones. So our review and comment for the school district is due in November. The vote's not till April. We do have some additional opportunities for the school board to vote. the board does need to make a decision on the specific ballot questions that will be brought forward. So that roadmap, there's several opportunities to bring this back to the school board and say, are we going in another direction? Are we pointed, for success, yes or no? So those are built into this schedule as well. But yeah, so review space needs of the school district. Top priority, talking about gym space and CTE space. First step, review and develop the space needs. Are we on the right track? The task force was great, but now we really need to meet with the staff and the educators. Facility assessment, this hadn't been done previously. Your district has already done that. Host user groups and community engagement sessions. What do people think? What do they want? What do they envision for their school district? Working with a construction manager to further develop those cost estimates is a really important piece to this puzzle. Continue to refine the design and cost. So again, we're coming back to that drawing board. We're continuing to refine. Things will change. They're not finalized until we submit go on that review and comment. Prepare and review that submit and comment. From there, our job is kind of complete. Now we talk about marketing and communication strategy. So there's a lot that goes into developing that strategy. Conducting community input sessions. The school board makes a decision on the ballot question. Launch a formal public information effort. So these are the out there meetings. We're going, Boone's door knocking, right? He's going door to door, talking to every neighbor he knows, telling them about this information that we've got. Where are we going? What community center? What sporting game? What football event? We're there. We're showing people the information again and again and asking their input. Present at community meetings, school events, civic groups. And then there's a bond election. So we take our bond vote and we back ourselves like 6 to 8 weeks out of there. That's really when we're out hitting the street. This is when we're public. We're getting people really excited about this opportunity to vote on the future of their school district. So it takes a long time. It's 10 months of solid effort. So although, projecting out these dates seems so far in advance, even if we're looking at the furthest opportunity on this 26 chart, there's a 27 chart. But that's 10 months out. That's a lot of work before now and then, for sure.
Well, I guess, if it comes to a vote for the board, I would really want the community to hear that, it's a concept, that there's lots more work to do with the teachers and, the athletic sites, and really make sure that we're not unintentionally saying, we've got to go on this, it's ready to go, So, that could be said before a vote is taken.
Absolutely, like, again, preliminarily, we're gonna say, we're gonna move forward with a one-site option, and now we really dig, we really get into the finer details of it, right? Yeah, this is the, and I guess that's kind of the question that everybody asks every time, is it 1, is it 3, I think this task force came to us with a one-site option. We asked them to bring us a proposal. They spent a lot of time and effort on it, and now really it's the board saying, yes, we like that option, no, we don't like that option, and then we move forward from there. Again, there's gonna be multiple times along the way. If we go out for a community survey and it comes back that 75% of people say this is a bad option, guess what? We're gonna have to pause and reevaluate where things are at. That's just the way it is. It's no different than anything else, though. We could, pick whatever option you want. If we get out there with a community survey and 75% of the people say we don't like this, you're gonna reevaluate where you're at, right? So I think that's just part of, this is part of the starting of the process, and we're 10 months into it, right? We're saying this is starting the process, but there's a lot of things that have happened prior to this. So for the board, though, this would be kind of kicking this off.
So how much information is put out there before a community survey? So for example, we're not set on square feet or anything right now, but if people pick up that, hey, it's not enough square feet, I mean, we have to be really careful about how we get all the information out there that Claire said that, hey, this is very preliminary. We're just looking at the concept right now.
Well, and I think you're not gonna, correct me again if you're probably gonna, it's gonna be refined, we're gonna have a 95, 98% solution before we go to a survey, or, so that way we know that the number that's, or if there's a number on the survey, or depending on what your question is, right? You say, are you willing to, I don't know, park in the back of the school, and everybody says no, we gotta change what we're doing, but.
So I think surveys, from my experience, are a little bit more genericized than that. They're typically done over the phone. People pick up the phone, schedule a time, and they talk with them. It's about 20 minutes of time, and you're asked a variety of different questions. Everything from your demographics, do you have students in the district, what's your age range, those types of things, so kind of get that out of the way. And then we start talking about, do you support a one-site concept? Do you not? Why? Open-ended questions. What would you support from a tax impact? So it's very genericized. We're not showing them a floor plan at this point. Because we're not there yet. This floor plan needs to be vetted out with staff involvement.
You're really trying to vet out, at this point, the direction.
Yes. If you get 95% of people saying absolutely, you're not closing their buildings, we gotta come back to this table. We gotta come back to the round table and say, okay, this is what we've heard. How are we going to, get back into this community with our goals? How are we gonna better educate them? Or how do we revise what we're doing if we're hearing that? It's really important to not only survey your community, but listen to the results that we receive. So we don't wanna get too far down the road, because we could very well have a curveball thrown at us based on, the information. But the survey is genericized intentionally, so we can get a very wide perspective of where people are thinking.
So that would come sooner than later.
I would think so. Some school districts even do it before this process.
I think we did mail out one previous, and then in our discussion last, we decided that the task force was the way to go this time to get this recommendation. So this recommendation has come from the community, but you're absolutely right to get the more input from more people on what this is. That's where the question comes in, do we need to do that or not?
Who decides what the questions are on the survey? Because I like the idea of the survey. I like the idea if the questions are very point blank, I don't know how you describe it, as you say generic, but Maya said, we went out for a survey, I don't know how many years ago, like 4 years ago, probably, or whatever. I voted against the survey because every question on it could be interpreted to either side. If you were a one-side person, you could interpret the question to go your way, and if you were a three-side, you could interpret the answers to go the other. So, and one of them, my personal opinion was that it should be very yes or no. Do you want one side or do you want three? How much you want to pay, then the tax impact portion. Because I don't think, at least at that time, the tax impact was the primary driver, right? I feel like the one side or the three side was the primary driver in the whole concept of what would pass and what would not. I don't know that that's changed, but I guess we'll find out.
Well, I guess what you're saying makes me think, okay, if, the task force had the benefit of all this prior knowledge that you built over months, right? For decision making. So do you need to give the people that are gonna take the survey some of that prior knowledge so that they have a context of what to answer? And I don't know how you would do that exactly, but.
That's my concern too, if we were just going to ask everybody today without showing them what they could have.
Well, and some rationale.
Right, yeah.
How did the task force get
yeah.
there, and what made them think this was the right move? I mean, I feel like otherwise, if the survey doesn't have any context, I worry about that. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a survey.
Yeah, and I think bringing in a survey consultant or two, to ask them, how would you approach the situation? We could interview survey consultants and say, here's where we're at today. Here's the state of the district. How would you proceed with the survey? And we can ask the different survey consultants how they would approach this. And then you get to pick, which strategy and which company that you think fits the district well.
I mean, if it's just a one-side question or no, there's no context for that, you know, it's like asking a 10-year-old, you know, a question where they just don't have enough information. I don't mean that to sound condescending, I just think we all want a lot of information before we make a big decision, and this is big money for families.
Especially that, like,
Elderly.
this school district has a history of, you know, some communities feel very strongly about one site and some feel very strongly about 3 sites, so, you know, like, without context and detail, those communities they don't have the information, so their opinion hasn't changed.
So they need some background
Right.
information.
They're gonna have all the information that they can have, and one of them information is you better know exactly how big the school's gonna be and not change it after you send the survey out. So you better know how big those classrooms are gonna be, you better know how much gym space you're gonna have, you better know if you're putting a track in, or if we're putting the softball fields down here, or buying land and putting it up here. They
Would that
they need to know all that, 'cause that might sway their decision, right?
Would that be like better suited for like community input sessions where we go out to community and say, here's the presentation, here's all the background information, you know, would that type of conversation be better suited for that environment versus pick up the phone and tell me what you would support from a tax impact to support your school district?
The phone thing is hard now, because are you relying on simply landlines for that type of survey? Because, you know, you got a huge demographic that doesn't even have one anymore. And so that phone thing, I think, becomes harder, regardless of whether this was a school survey or any other political survey or any type of survey. It has nothing to do with this. It just, right now, the phone surveys,
I get surveys on my phone from the most random things.
and how many of them do you go through, and how many do you say, I don't have time?
Right, yeah, right.
I think we'd have to educate ourselves. I certainly know nothing about how to run an effective survey, so that would be, you know, is it phone, is it mail? I don't have an opinion. I think maybe there's a consensus at the table, a survey is important. The timing of the survey seems to be a little fuzzy right now, but it feels like most people agree a survey, however it's delivered, is
Are there, I mean, we worked with a consultant for that previously. Is there somebody you guys have worked with in the past on doing surveys, or is that not in your wheelhouse, or?
Yeah, there's other consultants that we've been connected with on their referendums. I've worked recently with one up in the Lakewood School District. They surveyed their community, I think it was a spring.
Brainerd just surveyed theirs, and Little Falls just surveyed their district.
And I just heard a very small school district not far from here, contracting with another partner to do survey work. Well, one of my questions for you as board members in your community is, what do you think are the if you believe that taking a next step formal to kind of cement this concept is maybe a next step that is important for you, then after that, I hear talk with the learned, knowledgeable people about what you think you need in the design a little bit more. That's got to be one of the next major steps, and then take the pulse of the community. Is there a preferred order? Does it happen simultaneously sometimes in our work with other districts, or is the very next thing to get some of the people who know the schools, know the kids, and know the spaces that you need for the programs that you're running around the table to say, if we endorse a one-site plan, we're ready to go forward with the task force recommendation, take a brave, bold step to say we want to move forward in looking at this more deeply. Then do we get people who are expert users of the building to do that next piece of dialogue and say, what do we really think about what we've sketched out so far? I mean, to me, that's I would have a personal bias in that direction before I really want to take too much pulse of the community, because I want to be a little bit more firmly established in what I think we will be talking about for the limits and the parameters of a set of new spaces and remodeled old spaces, and certainly all that comes in motion, everything else with a consolidation. You know, So I don't know if there's any perfect answer to that, but where my head goes as a former superintendent and person who worked with a lot of board conversations is, okay, so if we endorse the concept, then do we flesh that concept out a little bit more before we go out to our public and ask? I think you've got some it seems to me like you've got some representation already on the task force saying, you've already sought our opinion, we do believe in the one-site, explore it, go look at it a little bit further, and then bring us something back that we think we can talk about more deeply.
I kind of hesitate with the surveys because I don't feel our past surveys have ever been that effective. Like, the feedback is minimal if we do something in the mail, because a lot of people just sit on the counter and then a few weeks later, like my files, you don't get to it and it doesn't get turned in, or I feel our community, I mean, we have a very large district, but we have the ones that are very strong, one-siders, very strong, three-siders, and some that are open to anything because they just want what's best for our community. So, and the one thing that the board has never done is come up with a plan and stuck with that plan. Because I mean, there's other school districts that develop, like, this is our vision, this is what we want, this is what's best for our community, and put it on the ballot again and again and again. And I think we're at that point, because we've done the one site, we've done the three site, we've done moving Kensington to Hoffman, we've done a lot of things. So I think we come up with the concept and the plan and push it out and hope that, I mean, we can hope that it passes the first time, but it might take us a few times. It doesn't mean that we just take more time to educate the community of this is why we need this.
So in your opinion, we probably, you know, if we're voting, you say, we don't need a survey, we're gonna come up with a plan, we're gonna move forward, and we're gonna educate everybody in the process, and we're gonna go after it.
I like the surveys if they're done in a way that you can get clear, concise stuff. The last time we went out for a survey, like I said, there was not a single, we got a very good response, well above average.
We
what
did.
The
It was
consultants
amazing.
thought we should get.
26%.
So from a paper standpoint, we got a very good return on our investment as far as getting people to fill it out. The problem was, if Maya and I were on two different sides of the equation and I wanted 3 and he wanted 1, just about every answer on there, we could interpret the answer to get to where we personally wanted to go. Like, there was never a question, 1 or 3, never on there. You know, there was never a question, this much money exactly for this project. One site, will you pay this much? 3 sites, will you pay this much? It's just every answer you could interpret one way or another, and so I didn't like it. The only reason I voted against it is because 2 other board members weren't at the table when we voted. So, but the biggest reason was because I didn't think we were gonna get a good answer, because both sides of the story could interpret the way they wanted, and it made it difficult for you folks or any of us to get a clear answer, so it was almost like we wasted a lot of time. But from the standpoint of getting people to fill them out, the people in our community and our district are very engaged in this. They've been engaged for a long time. And whether that'll get less, I don't know, or, you know, I want something to pass more than anybody, it's just as much as anybody else at this table. I just want the right thing to pass, you know, I think we all do, in our own mind, right, Joe? I don't know if we went out for a survey, if anybody at this table is gonna change their mind on how they're gonna vote.
My concern with going out for the survey this early on in the game is getting that background information and context out to people first. And how would we do that? And by the time we get all that out there, are we far enough down the road that it doesn't make sense to do the survey anymore, just put it out for a vote and see what happens?
I almost wish it would have been the opposite, to be honest with you, with the way that things went, that if we were gonna go over a survey, we should have done it before the task force was created, so the task force knew what parameters they had to work with. That the community, you know, if 70% of the community said they wanted 3 sites, then if that's what they want, now this significantly smaller percentage of the population, that's what you get to work on.
But there again, if
But
they,
it's open to the public.
Well, sure, it was open to the public, but just being open to the public doesn't mean there still wasn't anybody over the age of 65 on it.
there was.
Yeah,
Keith
was there?
Swanson's
We had
over
30.
65.
I'm 60.
He wasn't on at the first 2 meetings I was at, but
He-
there was, you know, that's 33% of your vote.
So I think,
Well,
I would just
and-
throw in
and We
there,
don't have to put on
right,
I don't wanna ramble on, but
no, and I guess I would just throw in there that, you know, if we're talking about, you know, you take that survey and 26% of your population returns a survey, well, now you got 70% of 26%, right? I mean, like if 70% of the survey answered this way, and it was only the 27-year-olds that answered the survey, still didn't hear from the 60-year-olds, right? Because they didn't answer the survey either. So I guess we could bring back to that same concept of, you know, those that didn't have kids involved, didn't volunteer for the task force, right? The same thing could be true when you ask the survey, and you're still not getting that demographic in there if it doesn't work that way, right?
we did
So
get a good demographic on our last survey, if we did,
I'm
were
just
to
saying,
decide to do that.
if that was one argument, was that only 26% of people answered the survey, and you got 57% of them that said this, well, that's not a very big part of your population when you start to think about the numbers, actually. So I guess, I don't know, I'm hearing a few people say they're not necessarily interested. Some are saying we like the survey. Is that where does the board think? Is that a next step for us, or are we gonna say that we're gonna take this and try to refine and get down the road a little ways before we would do that, or?
I think we have to have detail, like, you know, Kayla was saying that the survey's not, it's not necessarily effective, but if we don't have details to let the public know, like, hey, this is what we would like to move forward with, then it's just a concept, and there's all these questions about, well, you know, if we had 3 sites, you know, this is whatever, and if we had 1 site, we still have that argument, because nothing is solidified down to, this is the direction we would like to go. So, you know, we've gotten to here, 3 was recommended by the task force. So unless we get details on how much gym space we need and how much, you know, educational space we need, it's just a concept. So we don't really have anything to tell the public, hey, this is what we want, other than the community task force said we would like to do 1 site. But we don't have details for them to know and say, yes, I would support, you know, adding a second gym or whatever, because we don't even know if we need another gym, or if we need another classroom, or, you know, if we need square classrooms, you know what I'm saying? We need to have detail, so that when people are like, hey, what is this new school, you know, what are the benefits of
Tell me what I
having
get
this
for
new school?
$30 million.
Right. If they come up to you on the street and say, you know, why would I vote for this? And you don't have an answer, well, they're not gonna vote for it. And if the goal of this is to, you know, improve the education of our kids, then we have to be able to explain how spending $30 million is gonna benefit our kids at the end of the day.
And our taxpayers.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I think one of, you know, part of the recommendation at the 1 site was fiscal responsibility. So that answer for me, and the person from the street, is this is one of our jobs, financial responsibility to the district. And maintaining 3 buildings, according to what our recommendation is, was not, you know, not the way to go.
yeah.
But now, education in one building, you know, in a position that we're in this district, not everywhere is it this way. Our education can only improve for the students that come here.
But what do they get for $30 million? That's what they're gonna ask. They're gonna wanna know, you know, what does that $30
Well,
million
right now, we
get
have a
us?
picture of it. We have a pretty good plan. We have a pretty good plan right now.
Right,
Starting.
but as Darren points out, do
And-
we have enough space?
And that's not what we're here tonight to talk about, though. We're talking about, what are we gonna move on to?
Right, that's what I'm
So-
saying, like, I think that.
Are we gonna accept and discuss this one site plan, or are we gonna talk about 3 sites?
Right,
And
what I'm
if
saying
that
is-
person on the street asks me, what are we getting for 30 million? We're getting a 1 building site that down the road is gonna save us a ton of money.
So,
If you keep all the kids here.
Well, that's why we don't wanna
That's-
overbuild, right?
That's hypothetical.
We don't wanna
Because
overbuild.
If you
But
lose it,
because
if you
of
lose
what
it
you're
under,
saying, I
under
think,
it's
is,
not-
what am I gonna get for 30 million? You go right back to those pinnacles. You're gonna get this, fiscal responsibility, you're gonna hire quality instruct, you know, you just go right back to those. And that could format some of our, you know, framework when we discuss this,
Mhm.
you know, and, you know, I think taxpayers need to understand that, you know, the data says this is the most fiscally responsible. It's expensive, but our current plan, based on the data, is not sustainable financially, and it lacks instructional best practices. So-
We also have to understand that they feed us and we don't feed them.
Right,
The taxpayers, the businesses, the communities, they all feed the district. Right? They can, the community, they can theoretically exist without the district can't exist without them.
correct,
So
but,
we really have to see what
I
they
mean, you gotta be
want.
careful with that, right?
Well, I
Because
mean,
if
dude,
the
how-
kids,
how-
if the kids aren't here, the families aren't here, the people
Right,
aren't
I
here to
mean,
shop, you
there's-
know,
I get it.
that's how it works, so.
I get
And
it.
we are
I
the
mean-
biggest
I mean,
employer.
but we have to, everybody has to, the people at home might be they're all have their own way of looking at it, right? You know, a business owner that maybe doesn't have any kids in the district is maybe looking at this decision in a different direction than somebody that has young kids. Everybody's different in how they're looking at it, and we just have to give them the facts of the plan, whatever it is, and whatever plan this board decides to move forward with. But I agree, I'm for a survey, just not for, but I'm not for one if we don't have the specifics of the plan. So if you vote for, okay, this is the plan we're gonna go out for, then how much space are we gonna have?
so the focus of the survey is about money then? This is the
No,
plan.
it's about space too. It's about space. I mean, we've been told for a long, long time that we need way more space than this and not that long ago.
I guess then if that's what it comes down to is money and space, if we've gone to the experts about that, do we really, does grandma on the street, does she know what it should cost to build a school and how
I
much
think-
space the kids need?
I think it's significantly more, way more than just space and money, to me.
No,
I think
but what I'm
money's
saying,
not
that's,
even on I'm willing to pay more to
Okay.
get what I want, and I think a lot of other people are too. So, to me, that's not the only 2 pillars in this whole thing. I think it's, to me,
I'm talking about
personally,
with the
it's,
survey.
and to the people I feel like elected me, it's a big picture. It's not just this district, it's not just the communities, it's not just sports, it's not just education, it's all of this, all together into one pie, and you have to make a decision on what's best for everything.
The students.
Everything.
Well, and one of the
Everybody.
pinnacles is we are one, so,
You gotta make a
That's
decision
right.
that's right for everybody, and
And so we need to educate everybody. That's what we're here to talk about. Are we gonna get them educated?
they're getting educated, and
Well, I'm talking about the public, the people we're gonna survey.
right.
So my opinion as well is, we can send out a survey, get all these opinions, right? a for, against, or in between, where are we gonna be? We're still gotta go out with our idea and promote it. We say, hey, this is what we've looked at, this is the most responsible one we have. Space or no space, I'm not talking about that right now, I'm talking about one site. This is the most responsible thing we can do right now. This is what we need to move forward with. Otherwise, we're gonna be talking about how much building and this and that all night long.
So let me pause then for a second, that brings up a good point. So I would just ask, is there anybody that needs more information than they have currently to be able to say, yes, I would support what the recommendation came to us, or no, I need more information? Or, yes, I'm ready to vote on it. Whether you support it or not, that's your choice personally. But do you need more information to be able to make that decision, right? Is that where we're at right now? Does everybody have the information that they need to be able to make a decision whether I support or don't support what the recommendation came to us?
I don't have enough information.
You need more information. What do you need?
Well, the land purchase, the moving the ball fields and all that, I'm not really familiar with.
So
You know, that.
what about that question, I guess, what about that question would change your decision on whether you move forward with one? You just said
Yeah.
one site's the most fiscally responsible
It
decision
is.
we can make. So
Right.
my question to you is if it's $100,000 or $500,000, is it gonna change your mind on whether this is the best? Cause there's some money
Oh,
put in
is
to make that
that's
out,
built in.
like that's built in already.
So
There's-
that, I wanna see that plan.
Sure.
You know, how is that gonna lay out? I don't know that, you know, right now, I don't even know if that's possible.
Where's that land gonna be?
It was just up here. Well,
We had a
there's-
plan on the last
Depending
one.
on how many fields you put in. I remember when Terry was on the board and he looked at, there is room down below the football field, we believe, for a softball or maybe 2 softball fields or something like that. I don't know if it's one for sure.
It's,
But the choice that we made as a board before was to purchase, and we had a purchase agreement with the Olson land that was just, straight west of here, right?
it's right up on top of the
And
hill,
there's
yep.
room up there for 2 baseball fields, 2 softball fields, or 4 softball fields, I mean, basically 4 fields. And then I don't remember exactly what went on the ballot, if we were just gonna do, there was a couple
Was
options of
that-
like just doing 2,
So
but
there
there was
was
space for 4.
So there was an option on the ballot to go and move the softball fields and the varsity baseball field up on top of the hill. And then this was a different option there. And that went along with
Cause
a
that,
couple other
cause that
sports.
added like the track.
That was
and
with the
then-
track
so then-
involved, so there's more than just that involved. I think the fitness room was in there. There was a few other
Yeah,
things
there's-
that were
There
in
were a lot
that.
of options in that athletic
And-
question.
right.
But
And so, at this point, there hasn't been a purchase agreement, because of course, we're not at that point yet, but that was factored into this plan to say we need money to build these new fields, and I believe right now it's just 2 for 2, right? In this current plan is just 2 for 2. If you look, the field directly to the west there of the baseball field was basically up the hill was where they had looked to purchase 20 acres on that hill and build a ball complex up there.
and there would be parking up there too.
Right. And basically you would go up the hill and come around the curve and drive into it up there, yep.
Right up and through there, yeah.
And so whether that's still an option or not, you know, of course, we would have to go down that road, that's part of the vetting and all those things that we would have to do. The same people still live in that land right now,
But the cost to do it is in your plan,
Yes.
right?
yes. So again, I come back to Nathan, is that gonna change whether you would say yes to this plan or you would say no to this plan? Or is that something that can be vetted out in the process?
Well, I would say yes to this plan.
Anybody else need more information than what they have currently to be able to say yes or no to the plan that was presented to us by the task force? Because we're gonna have a lot of discussion going forward. And I guess if we're gonna be at a, decision point, let's just get there and move forward with it, so.
I have enough information.
Okay. So then at this point, we would be ready to go forward and the board would take a vote. And obviously, we're not voting tonight, this is a work session, so there's no decisions being made. But next steps now, if we start to look at a timeline, so if our board meeting is on the third, so our board meeting's on the 3rd of September, what is our timeline breakout? Let's just say we made a decision there, I'm gonna say we said yes, okay? Just as here we go, 3rd of this September. Now as we plug that into your timeline, now we're kind of in the mix, whether we do a survey, right? We're gonna start moving forward with starting to talk to educators. Are we, where do you think we're going?
You know what, I'm really intrigued by this survey conversation, because I'm not a survey expert.
Sure.
And so I'd like to learn more. I'd like to just explore that. You know, here's the current state of where we are at. What are our options? You know, just to learn more now, I think would be good. Not to make a decision, but just to educate ourselves on what that process looks like. When's the appropriate time? You know, because then we can lay out the schedule. You know, we can build one of these for this district very easily. And one thing, Paul, you and I touched base on
Is that the whole, are we seeing your whole picture, or is it cut off on our screen? I'm just.
Cut off a little bit, I think, over to the.
Well, April's the vote, so that's just referendum, but yeah.
This is
you
just
zoom
for
out
this is
here.
for a different district, right?
This is
So-
a different district,
Yeah,
but yeah, you zoom out and it goes years through design, development, construction documents, bidding, construction administration. So it's a big schedule, so you're just seeing that
If we were
first.
gonna decide to do it
step.
during the general election, is there plenty of time to get the job done? We can bid at the most opportune times
Yes,
and everything, right?
absolutely.
Because, I mean, even in the past, Maya would know more than anybody that's on the board, I'm very heavily for voting on these things during general elections, when people are engaged and you get the most people out, so that you, if pass or fail, you feel like you got what you're looking for.
The beauty behind that, so back to June 16th is our review and comment deadline. So we have the entire school year to capture so many people under these roofs that we can. And we can capture people at sporting events, community events. We've got a lot of time. So there's a really good opportunity if you target that general election in November and work yourselves back out of that. One thing that we talked about that didn't make my little schedule here is the task force was really passionate about, we've got this far, we really want to stay involved. And so I think when we start to build that schedule, I think we need to identify specifically opportunities for that task force to come back in, because they're going to be your biggest supporters, and they've got all this information. They know this better than probably we do at this point. So, you know, I think that's a huge piece to this too, is how we're going to integrate that group and make sure that they feel involved if they're willing and able to. Communication plan. You know, we talked a little bit about other districts starting to hire or consult out communication. We at WCA, we have that in-house as well. But what's the communication plan? Are we making videos? Are we doing brochures? Are we doing websites? How are we getting this information to your voters so that they have a lot of time to think about it, ask questions? How are we getting out to them? We have to build that all into this. And we can do that before November. You know, that doesn't have to be by June. So there's a lot of time there that we've got to build this. We're not in a rush. And that was one of the very first things we talked about is we don't want to rush this process. We want to make sure we're doing our due diligence. And by selecting like a general election next November, you really have the time to do this well and not rush the process.
and you have some examples of previous districts that, just some ideas of what they did for communication plans?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, we've got, I mean, even just from us, we
Right.
have a wealth of information on successful referendum communication plans and efforts.
You mentioned, to start working with a construction management. Is that I know in a previous bond, we had like 4 came in. Not only, engineering design, but construction management teams came in. Some had it all in-house, some of them was just the design, some of it was separate construction management. Is there a group, or is there somebody you guys work with, or do we have to solicit like proposals from, do we?
Yeah, that's pretty typical in the process to solicit proposals, bring them in here, meet with them. Yeah, there's a handful that we've worked with throughout the past on various school projects, so we could obviously offer that list.
You shoot
could
out to
open-
them,
be
we-
Open too, if you wanted.
We look at I know, like I said, we interviewed, I think, 4 different groups that came in and they basically tried to sell us their services, right? I mean, that's what was going on, so, what does the board feel like there? Or is that something do we want the Buildings and Grounds Committee to go through that process? Do we want to, take a recommendation? Hey, this is a good one. Obviously we have to go out, I would guess that.
We put an RFP together, I would think, probably, want me to go out and do that?
Yeah.
Or request for proposal, just to make sure. My recommendation would be that the entire board, I think, being the scope of this, the entire board should probably be part of that process with you guys facilitating, right, and saying these are the key components in case you say, there's a red flag here because this
Right.
company has.
I mean, is that something where our Buildings and Grounds wants to get together and maybe vet those out down to the whole board's gonna interview 4 of them, or maybe there is only 4, I don't know. I know there's more than 4, but you know what I'm saying, is that something that we would wanna, how does the board wanna proceed with that part of it? Or do we wanna
We do
just?
that last time, Mike. I feel like there was
I was,
7, 8 of them.
I was on the Buildings and Grounds, I can't remember if it was just whittled down by Dale, or if the Buildings and Grounds met and we kind of put it down to 4, and then we interview them all. As a board, we interview them all together. So,
I have no expertise in this, but just knowing the struggles we've had as a district, I think it would be good for the Buildings and Grounds Committee to vet that, and that there's not just one person and
Or do you think it should be the entire board going through all those?
well, but they could narrow it down to 3 that they think are.
a
Yeah,
vote,
no, I think
a
it needs to
number
be
that
a
we can
little
interview.
Yep, I would agree.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it's a little different this time. I feel like at least the last time, I don't know, it's been how many of them, but I feel like the last time weren't we interviewing, like you said, like engineers and
We
like
did.
what you got folks
We
doing
started
and
this-
deals, and then, but this time we would be just doing the construction
Just the
management.
construction
where
management
Last
portion.
time, there were some companies that did both, or some
Yep.
we picked this one or that one.
And that's where,
Meet and.
we started this process, and I'll be 100% transparent, I think we talked about this before. We didn't have any title with Seth, and nobody on the admin had a title with Seth before we started this process. That was one thing that came up before was, Barry Schmidt used the company that he had used before, and Dale used the company that he had used,
Yeah.
it was all, they gotta, he's getting a cut, that kind of thing. Widseth was one we interviewed, I think, last time. I can't remember who was here, but it was on our list, but it was the one that wasn't selected last time, and nobody had a tie, and I said, let's just start here. And so that's how this process started. So now, without the construction management piece, that would be where we would need to add to it, so.
So I would add a comment on the construction management conversation. Although Buildings and Grounds is really essential in understanding the constructability of a project, this is going to be a little bit different. So we're gonna look specifically for firms that have strong referendum support experience. So that takes a lot of people out of the equation.
Sure.
So I would suggest this group really wants to focus on people that are familiar with construction and strong referendum support. And we have a list of recommendations, just
Sure.
from people that we work with in various school districts all over, that we could bring in to have these conversations. But it's kind of looking at through the lens of a referendum, a little less construction focused.
Sure.
Still important, but definitely
Right.
we want someone with the referendum expertise.
I think that's great, it's just whatever we can do to guard against some of those things that we know were problematic for us in the past, so where's the guardrail?
And I would think you guys would be integral in that piece, right, to say, here's our group, here's our options, and weigh out, and hopefully give the buildings and grounds, hey, this group works really well with us. This guy that sent a proposal in, he didn't finish the last job, those are the things that we're not gonna know that. It's not gonna be on a resume.
This is your referendum team, it's not necessarily your construction team,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yep.
There's a difference there.
With maybe some suggestions of groups that you've used in the past, to say these are probably ones that we maybe not wanna start with.
I'm
because
fine
they're-
either way, it kinda, to me, it depends on the amount of proposals we get. If we get 4, why bring the buildings and grounds
Right.
in to not narrow it down? So maybe we go for proposals, and if there's a dozen of them, then maybe buildings and grounds tries to weed through them quickly or.
As long as more than one person weeds it down. If
Right.
there's a need to
Right.
kind
That
of
would be-
narrow the
And
field.
that's why I recommended that
Right.
group, not
That's-
for anything else.
Yeah,
Just
I
give
just
us-
wanna
only
make
4
sure
that
that
come
it's,
in.
it's not,
Yep.
somebody waving their line.
I would
We're
be
gonna
more
we're gonna
comfortable
interview
with-
4, right?
I would agree.
Yeah, I'd be more comfortable with, when selecting someone like that, if there's a limited, not 8 or 10, but, a fewer amount of people, I'd be more comfortable with the whole board interviewing.
So could we?
Absolutely, the whole board will interview at the
If
end.
there's 6 or
Yeah.
less, if
But-
there's 6 or less,
but I
we're
mean,
just gonna go to the
like I
board,
said,
and if it's
If
more
there's,
than 6, then we're gonna
you
weed them out through our committee.
And get us down to 4, or whatever,
As long as the
a reasonable amount.
transparency for the community is, this is not one person selected.
Right, absolutely.
And there's the
That's the piece
parameters that
that
we've
we
set, that they're,
Mhm.
here's the criteria, you're gonna evaluate those to bring us these
Yep.
4 or 6, whatever it is.
I would just reinforce the importance of, without a referendum, there is no construction. And so someone that is very, very capable in referendum support is what we're looking for. Maybe construction manager is the wrong term here to use today,
Sure.
but we're not looking for what's the best person that's gonna put the building together. It's who's the best team to get this referendum to pass is top importance, because without that, there's no construction, so.
Do you have interview questions that would support that kind of teasing out?
Yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
would have no idea.
Yeah, and we would have examples of past requests for qualifications. We have people that we would recommend that we've worked very successfully with in school districts before. But this is, we're not looking at it from a, can you construct the building? It's, can you join the team and get this referendum to pass with flying colors is what we're really looking for.
Which is part of your roadmap, I think, right,
Yes.
that you in there, yep.
Yep.
Still along with kind of the dollars and cents and what they provide for what costs and those kind of things, but.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
for me, if I was gonna say it today, I want one that's, fiscally responsible to a point, but that doesn't mean it's the cheapest one, because if I had 2 and the one was minutely more, but has worked with you guys, that's probably the one I'd choose, because there's efficiencies that you're gonna find in that versus learning each other in big projects. I mean, there's nothing against that. I mean, people have experience working with each other. There's typically efficiencies no matter how you look at it. So, that's where your guys' recommendations are, I guess I would take, they'd carry a lot of weight with me. But, so I don't know, that's kind of the other question, is how would we weed them out without them there? Without the WCA folks there. I mean,
We could ask them.
they may need to be there to help, not make the decision, but maybe give us
Right.
guidance. I don't know.
Or you narrow it down, they can see all of them as well, you can narrow it down and say, hey, these are the 4 that we think would fit us, does that they seem reasonable to bring to the board at that point? And I'm assuming when the interview's happening, you're here for that meeting as well to help
Yeah.
facilitate that process.
Yeah, we can sit in on them, obviously we wouldn't vote or anything on them, but we can offer our feedback on responses from them and what we heard,
that would be helpful. I mean, I had no idea that this piece about the referendum was woven into that degree. I would never know that, so
Mhm.
I think it'd be terrific if one or both of you could be listening for things or helping us construct questions that get at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
We want to build the strongest team possible.
Right.
Or Darren, do you do it from the perspective, I think MSBA does this, right, for superintendent candidates? I think they reviewed all your candidates, right, and they say, here's, we vetted these
They
6
did
out,
vet
we
out
believe
some
this
and
is
say,
your
"These-
best.
These are not
plan."
good fits for your district of your, you know.
Because everything's not,
Mhm.
everything's.
So it's not common for you folks to say this is who you should work for, or who you should hire,
Yeah,
or what is the norm?
yeah, we certainly can absolutely make
Yeah, and we
recommendations.
can offer our feedback on, hey, we, you know, based on their proposal, they're showing strong experience in referendums within so many years or whatever.
So is
No,
this?
I don't think I would come in and say, you need to select this one.
But you have experience with a lot of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Say,
Yeah.
you know, these guys have an extraordinary number of change orders compared to the others. Or,
Yep.
you know, these ones have come into budget under budget on 90% of their things, you know. The
Yeah.
change order things are huge, and there's a lot of companies out there that exploit that. So having, none of us would have that knowledge, and it's not gonna be on the piece of paper.
But you're talking about not necessarily the guys that are gonna give us you're talking about, this is gonna be a little bit higher level than that, right? So the group that we're gonna select in the construction management is really not the guys that are gonna give us the change, you know, we're not to that point yet. And
No,
so
but it is
just,
this company, once we
Right.
choose them, that's all part
They're
of
gonna-
it.
but they're gonna,
There, no,
No.
no.
No,
They
They
could
would
be,
not
they could
perform.
be, right? I mean, they could be the
no,
ones that.
not necessarily.
But I mean, there's an opportunity that they could be
They could-
pre-referendum, and then you could say, we're comfortable with this group to move forward to be our general contractor.
Potentially,
Yeah.
usually the construction manager would typically, which we have a slide for it, would typically be contracted directly with the district. And they would facilitate the bidding of essentially the subs, the different bid packages. But all of those contracts would typically be direct with you. They're just coordinating, scheduling. Now, they can self-perform, usually they would bid it just like anybody else, and if they happen to be low, they'll self-perform it or they won't. So in that scenario, when it gets to the bidding piece, you're seeing all the numbers, all the sub-numbers, and can make a decision, or, you know, if something raises a flag. Under a GC, they'll give you a number, but you're not seeing the sub-numbers.
Mhm.
So usually it'll be more of a pure construction management.
Sure.
process, especially if you're getting into a project of this scale where you maybe gotta look at phasing, scheduling of getting work done within certain periods of time so you don't interrupt school.
Coordination of like long lead time items. So probably when this building was built, it was probably a more traditional approach. That's the era of a more traditional approach. You have your school district and your architect. They put together their plans, they bid it, the community supported it, and you get your general contractor to build it. So that's kind of a more traditional approach. Now what we're seeing are these complex communication referendum needs in the beginning. And so you bring a construction management team on. So it's a three-legged stool instead of a two-legged stool. So that three-legged stool, we all hold each other accountable. When I come up with a crazy design, our construction manager will be like, whoa, that's gonna break our budget. We need to reel it back in. So they're the third party in the three-legged stool. So they then are part of that development. So it's all in this orange phase. Once a referendum passes, then the project goes out for bid. And then you have all the individual contractors that will bid the project. So it's not really a general contractor approach. It's a little bit different approach. But bringing that construction manager onto a team early is proven results in better efficiency, cost savings, and just overall improvements to a project because they're at the table early on and we're planning for these surprises ahead of time. If it's a brand new greenfield site and we're building a fresh building, you could probably get away with the general contractor, because it's very understood what your conditions are. When we get into complex strategies with school phasing, remodels, additions, having them on early is a value added to the team.
So what are the things we're gonna see in the proposals then from this? They're gonna bring in a book, talks about themselves and what they did, and, you know, where they come from and places they've worked with. What are the tangibles that we're gonna be looking at? What are the 5 things that are gonna be on there, like that we're gonna be kinda analyzing?
What I would want to request from someone in this position is, do you have experience working with districts of our size and with our complexities? That's my number one question. You can pass districts, you know, school districts for Fargo or Moorhead or St. Cloud all day long, but do you have experience in our specific category? And what are your rates of successful referendums? That's what I would want to know from a construction management firm on this project. Don't tell me about Fargo, don't tell me about St. Cloud, tell me about,
Old State.
yeah,
And what's
I'm
the
trying to
next-
think of
and
one.
then- And then what's the next thing?
Insula.
So so that's your number 1, which is a great one. What's your number 2 that we're analyzing? If you're gonna, let's just go deepest 3. What are the 3 things that we're gonna see from them, and you know what your top one is that we should be worried about?
I want to know how their approach to the communication effort. Start asking questions about surveying, all of those pieces, and get their feedback. Give me examples of how you've done that in other districts recently. You know, within the last 3 to 5 years.
That have had history of failed projects.
Yes.
Yes.
How did you get them over the?
And then my last question for them would be, let's look at this, the recommended site plan. All right, how are we gonna get these baseball fields or softball fields reconstructed? What would be your approach to designing this building around our softball schedule, making sure that they're ready for the next season? How are we getting in here and updating the track around the football field without disturbing the fall season and the spring season? How are we, you know, building a gym? Are we worried about future enrollment growth? Hey, we designed this beautiful school, and now all of a sudden these people start trickling back in. I've designed a school district like that. The day they cut the ribbon, they're like, our numbers went through the roof, and we're gonna start need to planning for the next project in 5 years. So how do you get ahead of all of these challenges that are unforeseen and let them kind of talk through those strategies with us?
So none of them have to do with cost, so what are we gonna see from these folks in cost structures? From my memory, we've seen a lot of significantly different cost structures from each one, and that was one of the things we really had to weed through. You know, some things were by percentage, some things were set prices, some things were so much to start with, and then a percentage, and is that something
We can ask.
that
for
you can help
Yeah.
Yeah.
us? Because otherwise, in the short amount of time we have to make a decision, that's really tough if you don't look at it all the time.
Yeah, what's
Because
their
they,
cost?
a lot of them do that on purpose, you know, when otherwise, in part of our request of proposals, we should have it in a specific way, so they're all bidding it at the exact same way.
I was just gonna say back to your community survey statement earlier is, you know, the results you got were, you know, mixed. Well, you have to make sure you're asking the right questions and then you get the right results. So we can help you with asking the right questions on a fee base.
So what's typical though, like, so this construction management, if we don't pass a referendum, where is how's their fee structure set in, you know?
Yeah, you may see, and you've probably seen in the past proposals, like a pre-referendum
Cost package.
effort. Yeah, and that can vary depending on however they want to approach it. And then a cost structure for it passed, now moving into construction management throughout the entire construction process. Yeah, implementation, correct.
And some you can waive that, don't they? They'll tell you if, we'll do your pre-referendum planning process at no cost, but we have to be your construction
Or
manager
some
through the
will,
project.
you know, maximum for pre-referendum services, but if it passes,
We'll blend that
give
into the
it
cost,
back.
right?
Exactly. That's not
So what you're saying is we gotta pick the right one and pass the referendum, and that's all taken care of.
Really easy.
We should have started with that.
Okay, thanks, we got to do.
Any other questions, comments?
What are our deliverables, I guess, for the September 3rd meeting? Do we have clear deliverables for the next month or so we know what to have on the agenda and
Yeah,
things
I
here?
guess at this point, we probably have some discussion about what we, what we went through. Likely, obviously, we're gonna pass it, we're gonna record all this referendum, work sessions. We would vote for or against the one-site option moving forward. Start to look at that process of how do we, pull in a construction manager to start this process. And that gets us through the first meeting.
Yep.
Set a
Are we doing all this next?
Work session.
next
probably.
week?
Yeah.
Set a date for our next work
I
session.
would say, we're probably gonna be,
Are we gonna choose a election time? Is everybody ready to do that or not? A goal
a goal of our time, are we gonna set that now? Is that something you guys wanna see right away, like we're saying we're gonna shoot for November? Or do you feel like we're
depends
not
on how comfortable you are.
ready?
If you get a
Are you
curveball-
guys ready?
well, there might be a curveball, but.
I was
what
ready
we can
10 years
say
ago, so.
Is the consensus that we know from the answers I heard tonight from you folks, we have plenty of time to do it. To hit the general election,
Yep.
which would be a year from this November, correct?
Correct.
It'll be the midterm.
I
Oh.
think we
Darren, I think it's a great idea, because that's that transparency piece right now. The
Right.
public knows that, okay, they've waited for a while, but they're,
I
Yep.
mean, that's always been my feeling, so I'm comfortable with that, because I want it on a general election.
but then our taxpayers know too that they're
Yeah.
moving forward,
Yeah.
and there's no,
And
we only knew about it 4 months in advance.
I think we can be prepared, or should be prepared to vote on that next.
So we'll put that on there too, that we would be looking at, timeline of November of 26. And then, of course, we'll start working that backwards. As far as we move forward, as we start to refine this plan and we start to look at your timeline, how frequently do you see us needing an additional meeting? Is there a lot of this stuff you think we can do? We're still gonna have morning board meetings once a month. Those get a little tricky to make sure we get everything in and get people to work on time. We will now start, the third is an evening meeting.
Yep.
So there's a little bit more flexibility there on those evening meetings. Do you feel like our committee meeting would be adequate time to have some of these discussions, or do you think that we need to start, I think everybody here is invested enough to say we're okay with the workshop every, if we gotta do one a month, or we gotta do one every other month. How frequently would you see that needing to be? And obviously we can do them, you guys can do them remotely, you don't have to come here every single time, I don't think, at this point, if we're gonna move forward with this.
Yeah, I think the next step is just to build a schedule and review it with you to see, your comfort level with the schedule. And we'll build those milestones in there. Opportunity to discuss with construction management, opportunity to talk with the survey consultant. Is that something that's now or later? Let's just build that in. How are we gonna get the task force back in this group? When's the right time to sit down with user group meetings? We have MSBA coming up, so it's a great opportunity for you all to go out there and see the newest, latest, greatest stuff in person in Minneapolis. So, do you wanna wait a little bit to see what's out there and then come back to the drawing table and say, okay, now that we've heard from our user groups, we've maybe heard from the community, we've saw stuff at MSBA, let's sit down and really sharpen our pencils on this plan. That might be a little too late, that might be a little too soon, I don't know, but, I think those are really good things to keep in mind as we've got a good amount of time.
I think it's really important for the principals and the teachers to look at this plan and say, and the extracurricular people, what works, what are they worried about, so we can respond to that
Yep.
as quickly as possible.
I think Chad kind of brought that up at that last meeting too, right? Was the custodial space or storage space, I think was what his concern was, so, yep.
I hosted the, educational trends portion of that presentation for the task force. But we talked a little bit about your staff too, is that something, do we wanna do an educational trends day? Do we wanna do a tour day? Go look at some new facilities and see what other people are doing. Those are all things that we've done in the past. Anything that feels good to this group. So we can put together a handful of conceptual schedule ideas and present that back to this group and say, okay, where are these milestones that we need to be back here with this team?
I think it's a good plan. I'm a little nervous about waiting until January to check things out with MSBA. I think that puts us a little behind, so it makes me nervous.
I think we continue forward. Obviously, if you see something at the conference and you say, hey, that would really fit well here, I mean, we're not,
I think a lot of that
Sunk
stuff
in
is
the
gonna
water.
come in once something passes, right? Colors, cabinets, all the stuff where they're laid out in the room. I mean, that's all after something passes, right?
Absolutely.
right.
And that's-
We're talking about the bones right now, is what
The
you're saying.
concept of it though, the idea of, hey, this system here is a really great addition, or, that we didn't think about, or,
Mhm. Science classroom space, because we want to update those. I know the indoor playground kind of came from your conversations,
Yeah.
that really got a lot of traction from a lot of our
And Paul,
staff.
one of the things I'm hearing is maybe a deliverable is that schedule. Is that one of the next things that you'll be doing is trying to construct a schedule
Mhm.
to stay transparent and open with the community and to continue to do kind of the first two things on the middle phase of the roadmap, which was looking at your communications, which has survey, user groups and community input, and then refining the plan. And then
Yep.
you're looking to build a schedule to do those very things.
Maybe that could go in one of your articles.
I think it's a great idea. And then how the public can plan to get updates too,
Yeah.
here's our milestones on that, so.
Well, then if we have, let's put a map on the wall somewhere. You know what, here's where we are today, this is where we met this milestone, we're on target, we're a little behind, hey, we need to throw an extra meeting in here, we need to make sure that we get these things taken care of before the next meeting. All those things can happen, and we can continue to say we're on target, we're where we need to be at this point. Yeah,
That would be really good.
so, is that all we got?
Motion to adjourn?
Yep.
I don't know if we have to
Is there a
take, because
second?
we're not
I
taking
don't
any action, so I think you just
We
motion to
called it to
adjourn,
order,
yeah.
but we're adjourned then, so. Yeah. Good meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You guys did a great job.
I guess that.
I had zero understanding of the construction people being involved in the ground.
Yeah.